Hi everyone, welcome to the Whiteleyverse with me, Connor Whiteley, for another daily short story. Now, before I start today's story, please remember to like, comment and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new content, and the engagement really helps the Whiteleyverse with the YouTube algorithm. Also, if you want to buy this short story and any of my other fiction, then they're available from all major ebook retailers and at your local bookstore and local library if you requested, and you can order paperback copies from Amazon. Now, here's today's short story. I hope you enjoyed just as much as I did writing it.
Problem in a car. When Betty opened her eyes, she didn't see anything. Everything was black. Actually, she wasn't even sure if everything was black or if she was blind. She couldn't see a thing. Betty forced her eyes to open, but as she felt her muscles strain, she realized her eyes were wide open, and she still couldn't see anything. A headache corkscrewed across her head, and she hissed with pain as she felt pain radiate from the back of her head. Betty tried to remember what had happened, but she couldn't. In fact, she couldn't remember anything. Her body jerked as it felt like she was moving forward, but after a few seconds she realized she wasn't moving, it was what she was in. Betty realized she must have been in some kind of vehicle. As she closed her useless eyes and focused, Betty frowned as she heard the distant sounds of honking, driving, screaming, talking, shouting and banging. Betty was hardly impressed with all this. She knew she was a private eye who might have been hired. Maybe this was connected to a case, maybe it wasn't, maybe Betty just had no idea. As she tried to move, she felt something move on her face. Betty's frown deepened when she realized she had some sort of thing over her face. It wasn't tight, but it was good at blocking her sight. It could have been a blindfold, a bag, or anything for all Betty knew. Betty tried to move and stretch out, then she realized she was stuffed into something small with her knees pressed into her chest. She rolled her eyes. She was stuffed into the boot of a vehicle. Betty didn't know if the criminals or whoever did this to her was stupid or brave. Kidnapping was serious. Betty felt her stomach churn as it dawned on her whoever did this to her probably weren't some normal crooks. She tried to roll over but stopped and hissed. Tight ropes sliced into her wrists and ankles as she tried to move. Betty tried again. She froze when she felt something tighten around her neck. Swearing under her breath, Betty didn't doubt for a moment the criminals behind this had tied a restrictor knot around her. In other words, Betty knew the more she struggled, the tighter the rope would get around her neck. She was trapped. A part of Betty wanted to congratulate the criminals, because this wasn't an easy thing to do. A knot like that took skills. It took even more skills to kidnap someone like Betty. But the more she thought about it, the more the cold, fearful sweat dripped down her back. Betty hoped she'd survive. She tried to cast her mind back, but there was nothing. Betty was relieved to remember her beautiful, annoying sister Phryne. Her sexy, drop-dead gorgeous boyfriend Graham, but she felt like there was someone else she needed to remember. She tried to remember the person felt like the center of her world, someone she loved like her own child. Did she have children? Again, the memories weren't returning. Taking a few deep breaths, Betty's frown deepened even more as she breathed in the thick, polluted air of London. She cocked her head at that idea. Why was she in London? Sure, she sometimes worked here and did a few cases for high-power companies, Betty knew that. But she lived in Kent. She remembered wanting to spend more time there to see what happened with Graham. Betty went to nod to herself, but she remembered the knot around her neck. None of this made sense, but she tried to think about the case or anything that might explain why she was kidnapped, but another headache corkscrewed across her mind. Betty hissed. Yet the headache passed. She remembered something, and Betty instantly smiled. She remembered her amazing, beautiful nephew Sean, and his boyfriend Harry. Betty felt her stomach relax as she focused on Sean and his amazing smile, and how happy he was with Harry. He truly loved him, and the case. Betty gave a quiet cheer as she remembered something. They were all working on a case together. It was something to do with an accounting company who had hired her. The boss thought someone was stealing from the company, and he only trusted Betty to do the job right. Betty smiled more and more as she remembered what had happened. She was looking over the accounts in her office when Sean and Harry had popped in after a date. They wanted to know if Betty wanted to go see her sister with them, also known as drive them home. She remembered agreeing because she would do anything for Sean, and she wanted to hear about his degree, as he was home for a few weeks from university. Betty cursed under her breath as she couldn't remember anymore, but it was a start. The case had something to do with stealing from a company. Her body jerked as the vehicle ran over a speed bump. Betty cursed. Casting her mind back, Betty tried to consider what she normally did in these cases. Considering she must have involved Sean and Harry, the books must have been uneventful, but there must have been something computer-related. Betty's eyebrows rose as she remembered a few fragments of memory of Harry's computer powers being useful in the past few months. Her hands ached and the tips of her fingers felt numb, so Betty carefully moved her fingers. The rope tightened around her neck. Another memory popped into Betty's mind, as she remembered Harry suggesting she check the employees' finances and start from there. She normally did that first, but perhaps the client had made her start with the company accounts. Betty couldn't remember that clearly. Her body moved forward as the vehicle braked. Betty's heart jumped to her throat. She relaxed when she heard the beeping of traffic lights. But her panic was realized as she knew sooner or later the vehicle, probably a car actually, would stop and she would be dealt with. Dealt with. Betty's eyes narrowed on the darkness, as she remembered the entire case now. Those words were what she had found, they were the key to everything. They were the words she heard before she was kidnapped. Fully remembering what happened, Betty remembered Harry helping her check the finances and all the criminal records of the employees. She couldn't believe how quick of a job it was with two people. It turned out the records and finances were clear. But Sean found something in the books that Betty had missed. She wasn't too pleased with herself. He found there was a weird charge every month to an international company. Betty knew Sean had a few friends doing law and business at university, so she didn't know why she was surprised when he told her all the strange ways companies used to hide money. Betty remembered there was a former fraud investigator at the university too. Betty jerked forward. Her head hit something. Pain flooded her head. The car sped off. Betty swore repeatedly as the pain cleared, and she knew she had to hurry up and remember everything. Retracing her steps, she remembered looking into that international company. Yes. She smiled, as she remembered breaking into the building in London the company was registered to. The car turned violently. Images of documents, people and rooms filled her mind. Betty remembered finding a name, no, not a name, an organization. Then it hit her. Betty's eyes wetted as she remembered every little detail, in the clearest detail. When Betty was looking through the office of the international company, she found some photos and she recognized them all. It was a photo of the office's Christmas party a few months ago, and an entire syndicate of human traffickers were there that Graham had been hunting down in the last few months. The syndicate were trafficking people through the port of Dover. There were bodies everywhere this group went, and now tears dripped down Betty's face. She knew she was next. Then she realized she couldn't remember where she was when she was kidnapped. But there was a fragmented memory before everything went black. She remembered a smooth, sexy voice of a handsome cop, Graham. Well, she hoped it was Graham. She didn't know, she could have been hoping. It could have been her would-be killers for all she knew. The car stopped. Door slammed. Betty's heart pounded into her throat. The boot door opened. Someone grabbed her face. They pulled off the bag. Betty forced herself not to scream as she stared at a tall middle-aged man in a tight black suit and a black face mask. It wasn't expensive like the suit, but the mask covered his head. But Betty would never ever forget those cold dark eyes. In that moment, all Betty wanted was for Graham to save her. The man pulled a knife. Betty screamed. He cut away the knot around her neck, and Betty moved a little. Feeling returned in her fingers, but she still didn't feel safe. Then her private eye training kicked in. She needed to focus, she needed to survive. Her eyes narrowed on everything except the man. The man wouldn't be any use to her. Betty focused on the cold concrete ceiling, and bars of flickering white light that ran across the walls. She heard other cars in the distance. Maybe there were several floors up, and the air stunk of urine and weed. She hated it. At least Betty knew she was in a multi-story car park. Her eyes widened as she realized what that meant. It meant the criminals were moving her into another car. Her mind screamed at her to do something. The logical part of her knew if Graham was coming for her, it all depended on him being able to track this car. Perhaps the police had satellite or camera footage, and they were following the car. The police couldn't afford for a change of vehicles. Betty's eyes narrowed on the black-suited man, as she knew exactly what she had to do. The man pointed the knife at her and cut her legs free. A small part of Betty wanted to kick him, but there was a chance the man didn't see her as a threat yet. She needed to keep it that way, for as long as possible. "Can I sit up?" Betty asked calmly. The man nodded. Stretching herself as she moved, Betty sat up inside the car boot and dangled her legs over the edge. She wasn't going to dare get out yet. "You know who I am, who are you?" Betty asked. The man cocked his head for a moment. "Come on. You're going to kill me. I might as well know my killers are." The man nodded at that, and took a step closer to Betty. She breathed in his rich, earthy aftershave. "The syndicate is who we are. We are the ones who plague nations. Build up countries. Tear them down." Betty smiled. "A bit overdramatic." "Agreed. We always deal with more impressive people, but the syndicate sends me when they have a you-sized problem." Betty frowned. "A me-sized problem?" The man smiled. "I'm sorry. A small fish problem. No one will miss you. You kill a cop, diplomat, intelligence asset. You get a nation after you. Kill an everyday person." Betty nodded. She was about to say something when she thought she heard footsteps. Even if she had heard them, they didn't sound like normal footsteps. They were heavy, armored, and more than one. She pushed those thoughts away. Betty was being silly. "What's going to happen to me?" Oddly enough, the man looked sad, and gently rubbed Betty's hand. "I don't want to kill you. You intelligent. Nice. A good person even." Betty wasn't sure how to take that. "But I'm getting paid. Normally I love the killing of stupid lowlives who cross the syndicate. But you Missy." A part of Betty wanted to try to stupidly talk him out of it, but she wasn't sure if that would anger him or not. She opened her mouth but closed it slowly when she saw a very small flashing light behind some cars tens of meters away. Betty smiled. "Tell me, when did you start working for the syndicate?" The man started playing with his knife. "I don't know, maybe a few years back in Paris." "Beautiful city, ever been?" "Sadly not. Would love to go." "How many syndicate members have you met?" The man pointed the knife at Betty's throat. "I know all 6 members. They know me and they pay me enough to kill you." The man pressed the cold blade against her throat. Betty stared at him. Their eyes locked. "Do I have to make him say names?" Betty shouted. Armed response units stormed out. Guns raised. They prepared to shoot. Graham rushed out, grabbing the knife, throwing the man to the ground. Betty breathed. She was safe. Her Graham had found her. A few hours later, Betty allowed the warm, toasty blanket to cover her entire body like a tight cocoon. She loved the warm feeling of safety it provided. Betty gently moved her fingers over the soft baby blue fabric of her sister's 3-seater. The air smelt delicious of warm hot chocolate and cheese toasties, as everyone was in the kitchen making a fuss over her. When Graham had brought her back, everyone cried in happiness as they saw her. Betty almost cried herself. She didn't know the man had been that wrong about no one missing her. Her family loved her so much, and she loved them. As someone moved her head, Betty smiled as her focus returned to the love of her life, and the only person who wasn't in the kitchen. Looking up, Betty blew Graham a massive kiss, and she stared into his warm eyes as she admired his smooth, handsome face. The sound of her family in the kitchen, trying to make sure everything was perfect for Betty's dinner and hot chocolate, made her laugh a little. It still hadn't sunk in how much her family loved her. Even Harry, who was basically family now, had wanted her back. Continuing to stare at Graham's beautiful face, Betty struggled to believe what she had found out today. Graham gave her a massive snog for helping him and his task force. There were whispers of major arrests going to happen now, and Graham expected even more was going to happen after the intelligence service had interrogated the man. Graham was even grateful for Betty's client agreeing to tell the police everything he knew about the stealing. But Betty wasn't interested in that. As Betty breathed in the delicious chocolate, felt the warm blanket and her amazing boyfriend, and heard her amazing family in the kitchen, she realized she had everything she cared about. She was perfectly happy lying here, and she felt safe. Happy and safe. Two things she hadn't felt for years, but she had always had. Especially now with Graham in her life. So as Betty's eyes grew heavier, she smiled as she realized she had everything, she loved everything, and this all started with some problem in a car, and how she was saved by the people who loved her. Now that, Betty could happily live with.
Welcome back everyone, it's me again, Connor Whiteley. So I really hope that you enjoyed today's story, because I flat out love writing, creating stories and sharing them with you. If you really enjoyed today's story, then please remember to like, comment and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new content, and the engagement really helps the Whiteleyverse with the YouTube algorithms. And if you want to buy this short story or any of my other fiction, then they're available from all major ebook retailers, and you can get them from your local library if you requested, and you can order the paperback copies from Amazon, your local bookstore or local library if you request it. Lastly, if you want to support the channel on a one-off basis, then you can now buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Connor Whiteley. Also, if you know anyone who would enjoy today's story, then please share it with them. I'm always really grateful when you wonderful people help spread the word about the channel. So, thanks for watching the Whiteleyverse, and I'll see you again soon. Have a great day, everyone.